Greetings from Grand Forks. I am coming to you live from my studio in the basement today. So this is kind of another one of my happy places. I spend a lot more time down here in the winter months rather than the summer months, but I just so happened to come down here today and I thought, I think we're just gonna do this here today. So this is where we are. I want to talk about another product today. I know you're all really surprised by that, but this is kind of a part two to what we did last time. So last time we talked about block and the benefits that has, and in my opinion, the place that that has in your regimen. I believe that it can be used on an everyday basis for people, and I believe it can be used as a cheat pill, okay? So specific for that carbon sugar blocking, and we talked about the mechanism of action of that ingredient in there, of that white kidney bean extract, and then also the seaweed, which is gonna expand and give you a satiated feeling, and then the iodine, which of course is thyroid supportive. So again, that has a place for certain individuals. Now today, we're gonna talk about the new and improved balance. And the reason I say that is that this is really more scientifically advanced. I am just sold on this product. The more reading I did about it, and if diabetes runs in your family like it does in mine, this might really pique your curiosity. And I think that this has great health benefits, whether you're diabetic or not, and I'm gonna explain why, because it all kind of boils down to blood sugar stabilization, which we all know is so important. If you haven't figured that out by how I keep yammering and yammering about that, you need to hear me out this time, okay? Because we're gonna get into a little bit more nitty gritty, okay? So first of all, I want you to understand what a glycemic index means. You've probably heard this term, right? But unless you really understand what that means, I want you to understand what that means, okay? So a glycemic index is a scale. It's a scale that kind of ranks by number how quickly a carbohydrate and sugar is processed in our body and how that's going to quickly spike our blood sugars, okay? So it's a fairly new thing. It was developed by a doctor up in Canada, a Dr. Jenkins, in the 80s. So he's given a number. So our control is, pure glucose, of course, but we're given a number. So anything that is going to be 55 or less is considered a low glycemic index number ranking for a food, okay? And anything 70 or above is considered a high glucose or index number on a food, okay? So again, it has to do with how quickly that food is going to reflect in a blood sugar reading, okay? Does that make sense? So that's important, okay? And this is within like a 2 to 3 hour window is what we're talking about. All right, so first of all, factors that affect that glycemic index of a food. Okay, all sugars are not created equal either. Okay, we may think so, but that is not the case. Even different sugars have different glycemic index numbers. Okay, so for instance, 23 is the number on fructose. Okay, that's way less than 55. And 105 for maltose, way more than 70, right? That's quite a range. So first of all, that type of sugar that it contains affects that. The second thing, the structure of that starch, okay? So amylose is difficult to digest, whereas you've got amylopectin, which is easy to digest. So foods that have this higher amylose content are gonna have a lower glycemic index. Okay, so again, that structure of that starch and the enzymes present. Okay, how refined a carb is, how refined? I mean processed. Processed foods, we've talked about that they're not good for us, and this is another indicator, and this is another reason they are not. So the more we process a food, that glycemic index number is going to be higher. That's just how it works, okay? Next thing, the nutrition composition of a food item. So if you have more protein and fat in that food item, it's gonna be slower to digest, which again is going to give it a lower glycemic index number, okay? The cooking method. If you cook stuff low and slow, that glycemic index number is going to be higher, not as good. Isn't that craziness? But yeah, also a thing. Okay, ripeness. Here's pretty fascinating too. Okay, let's take for instance a banana. If you have a banana that's underripe, that glycemic index number is going to be in the 30s, but as that fruit ripens, those sugars change. And in a ripe banana, it's closer to 50. Yeah, so all these things are gonna affect that glycemic index number. Okay, so now let's bring in our product. Balance. We're gonna start with a real balance, first of all. We're gonna talk about balance, but we're gonna talk about a real balance, okay? So talking about glycemic index of a number. Isn't this thing cool? This was my grandpa's. Okay, so we've got something that is gonna be a starchy food with a high glycemic index number, and something that is gonna have a lower glycemic index number. Now we've got the same weight of these foods, okay? So for instance, we're just gonna pick a number. Let's say I have 50 grams of these little snack crackers and 50 grams of nuts, almonds, okay? So we can put this on the scale. That didn't move very good, did it? Okay, well, you get the idea. So we put this on the scale, but we can balance it out with another food, and we may have a way higher glycemic index number even though it's the same weight of the food, okay? So when we put this carb load into our body with that higher glycemic index number, it's gonna shoot our blood sugars up quicker, and therefore insulin needs to be released from our pancreas faster to get that, you know, insulin, or to get your blood sugar number stabilized again, okay? Does that make sense? So what we want ideally is for that number to always be in between, meaning your blood sugar number, to be in between 80 and 120. If we can keep, instead of having this happening, we just want this happening, okay? So blood sugar stability. Does that make sense when I talk about stability? Having just a small swing as opposed to a big swing makes a difference, okay? So again, if we have these foods, so let's take like examples, okay? We can take white bread, high glycemic index number, high. We can take whole wheat bread, lower, okay? So making these food choices. We can have white rice versus quinoa. We could have, starchy vegetables like a potato versus broccoli, all right? So it does make a difference. Even though you're eating the same grams in those foods, depending on the makeup of the sugars in that food is gonna have an effect on our blood sugar stability, okay? So that's what that means. Now let's get into balance the product. Now we have balanced the lesson, now we're gonna get into balance the product, okay? So block had 3 ingredients we went over, right? Balance has 4. Again, really simple ingredients. These are, it's just craziness when you think about how simple these ingredients are. Very recognizable, but yet so crucial in how that whole system works in our body. Okay, so the one common ingredient it has is that white kidney bean extract, and we talked about that. So what that does, when you digest food again, we have amylase, an enzyme that is produced in our saliva. So as soon as we intake food, that goes in and it starts to chomp on our food and start to digest that into smaller molecules of these sugars and starches, and that's when our body absorbs it and we get that rise in our blood sugars, right? And then as it continues down the digestive tract, then we get another enzyme secreted, and that's called alpha glycosidase, okay? So we have those 2 enzymes going on, and what this white kidney bean extract does is it doesn't allow these enzymes to do their job, which is what we want. We don't want them digesting those sugars because then they're absorbed. What they do instead is they neutralize them. They block them, okay? They block them so they can't work. And therefore we don't get that rise in our bloodstream of that sugar, okay? So that's really cool. But it also does not affect the way the nutrients are absorbed. So we still get the nutrients from our foods, but when it comes to the sugars and carbs, we're not gonna see that kind of swing that we just talked about, that balance swing, okay? So the second thing, they also have common bean extract. And so if you think the common bean extract is going to be more active on that alpha amylase enzyme, okay, so the breakdown of starches. So it's specific for that, and it takes a bit of time for that to work. So again, because that's excreted right away when we start eating, right? So you want this product on board about 30 minutes before you eat, because you want that in there ready to neutralize that enzyme, as that's going to break down your starches. And then we have another product, the mulberry leaf extract. So we think of that as working specifically on the simple sugars by way of the alpha glycosidase. Fun fact though about this mulberry. Okay, you've heard of mulberry. We've heard of like mulberry tea, right? That's the leaves, and we use that as humans, and we like that. But another thing is that the mulberry tree itself is a food source for the silkworm. That's where we get silk production, right? So it's kind of crazy. But the leaf of this mulberry, you know, the extract of this leaf is really important because it works again on these simple sugars by way of neutralizing specifically that alpha glycosidase. So yeah, that's how that one works. So we have the white kidney bean, we have the common bean, and then we have this mulberry leaf extract. Okay, does that make sense? Now the fourth ingredient in here, cinnamon bark extract. Right? Cinnamon, we're all very familiar with that. That's what it is. The cinnamon bark is what is ground, and then you make cinnamon powder, right? But what is unique to this, it's a specific species. It's the cassia cinnamon. And there are many cinnamons out there. Cassia would not be like high on the taste list for cinnamon in my personal opinion. It's not really spicy or really sweet or anything, that it's pretty general. However, what makes it really special in a product like this is it's been studied the most, and it's abundant in these bioactive compounds that are going to balance in our endocrine system, and therefore it balances that hormonal response to food. So again, you can think of it as increasing that sensitivity for our insulin receptors. Okay, does that make sense? So we've got a number of things going on in layers that are all like doing the same job, but through a different means, synergistically. We've got all these ingredients coming in and working in just a little bit different way that all work together to get the same job done. So it's pretty cool, right? Okay, so let's talk about who can really benefit from this. So I'm sure that you are well aware, you know, how I've talked about sugars and sugar stabilization and blood sugar and all this, diabetics, pre-diabetics. If you know somebody in this category, this is a no-brainer in my mind. If you can take a product that is going to decrease the glycemic index of a food by means of breaking down or not breaking down those carbs and sugars into something that's digested into our system, that's wonderful, right? Isn't that wonderful? When we don't get this going on that balance, but we can keep that stability range within the 80 to 120, that's incredible. I mean, think about that, that's incredible. So even in studies that have been done, if you, like even the incidence of developing type 2 diabetes, if you can keep those levels in that small swing, the chances of that happening decrease by 33% of even being diagnosed as a type 2 diabetic, okay? So also, if you can, okay, how do I explain this? So the risk of developing type 2 is increased by 8% for every time you add another 5 points in that glycemic index scale. So it's significant. In my opinion, that's significant. So again, in diabetes, it's like a big deal, okay? Gestational diabetes would be another thing if you're a mommy in training, mommy. So yeah, if you cannot have gestational diabetes, and we all know when you do, then your birth weight of your babies can increase, which also causes short and long-term complications down the road. So another great thing. Okay, and I can still hear you saying, well, I don't get it. I'm not diabetic. I don't have it running in my family. I'm not overweight. I don't need to lose weight. So I don't understand what the big deal is. Okay, let's talk about some other really big deals about keeping your blood sugar stable. Okay, improved cholesterol levels. Of course, it can help you lose weight or maintain weight. How about decreasing your risk of cancer, decreasing your risk of heart disease. I mean, these are all things that Americans struggle with. If it's not in you or your family tree yet, the chances of things like this happening are pretty common, okay? So take control of your health now, people. Really take control of it now. It's all about quality of life. And if you are investing on the front end for quality of life, hopefully you're not investing on the other end, right? Isn't that what it's all about? Okay, so again, we take this daily. This is not a cheap pill in my opinion. This is about maintaining blood sugars in that small scope, in that small range, okay? So it works synergistically with the Slim. It works wonderful in tandem with our Slim product. So we take 2 with our largest carb meal. This does not make sense to take if you are having one of our lean shakes, okay, for lunch. This does not make sense. This makes sense when you're having a meal, okay, your largest meal of the day. And again, if you can get this in your system about, in my opinion, 20 to 30 minutes, so it's active and working and ready to fight, okay, that's when it's ideal. Now, if you forget, please take it when you think of it. I mean, it's better to have it in your system than, just like all the other products, there's always an ideal time, but it's better to get it in than not get it at all, right? Okay, so clean. This, again, cleanly sourced. We talked about these ingredients, okay? So gluten-free, 0 soy, 0 nuts, 0 yeast, 0 dairy. It is vegetarian. There are no nuts in it, no artificial colors, preservatives, or flavors. So that seems to kind of go without saying almost all the time, doesn't it? So again, if you have any questions on this product, it's a complicated product, but not a complicated product. It's like really simple ingredients, but so scientifically based. It's wonderful. It's a great addition to anybody's regimen. And I really want you to dig into this more on your own. And if you have questions, get them in those comments. Let us know. Talk to the ambassador up in your upline. Reach out to me or anybody on our team. We'd be happy to help you and get you on a program that is going to be ideal for what you want to fix, right? Okay, all. Have a great day, and thanks again for tuning in.